Messi prefiere con Nico por aquí. González para Messi. Messi, Messi, Messi. ¡Gol! ¡Argentino! ¡Hat-trick de Messi! En su debut.
Was that the last goal or the first one?
Hat trick de Messi.
Oh, hat trick to Messi. Yeah. I feel like every 4 years we play that guy. What's his name? Is it the same guy?
It's going to kill me. It's going to kill me.
I'm going to tell you right now, I watched the entire game, Argentina and Algeria. It was mesmerizing. Messy mesmerizing. See, I don't know anything about soccer, and I don't even like soccer, but I do like the World Cup, and every 4 years I tune into the World Cup. I'll even watch the Euro that happens every 4 years as well, just on off years of the World Cup, whatever it is, because I like the importance the rest of the world places on it. Let me just mention for last night, because I don't want to lose this thought, the national anthems that were sung for both Argentina and Algeria that may be the best part of these games, is to see the emotion. I mean, you had Argentinians crying at Arrowhead Stadium during their own national anthem. The whole thing is really very, very interesting because it just doesn't matter in this country and never will. I've lived long enough to see every iteration of soccer's going to be this sport. Here's the new league. Here's the new star. It's just not for us. And I'm not saying that there aren't people that enjoy it. Obviously, we're a country of 340, million people, and there are a lot of people that like soccer. By the way, I did not realize this. Kansas City has been consistently, for the last 2 World Cups, the number 1 rated soccer television market during the World Cup. They're a very good soccer city. They support their MLS team. I can't tell you for the life of me what their MLS team's name is, but they really like soccer in Kansas City. I think they like it in Seattle a lot. And, obviously New York and LA. And here, there's a lot, because we're such an international community. We have a lot of soccer fans here. I tuned in last night because it was Messi. And the buildup to it on their show that they had was really like, okay, you got to watch this guy. I remember maybe 2 World Cups ago watching Messi, and everybody was raving about him. And it was like, I don't know anything about soccer, but I can tell that guy is different from the rest of them. It's like, I would imagine that if you are, not a sports fan, or let's just say not a basketball fan, you could have watched the NBA Finals and identified that Wemby's a little bit different than everybody else. Now, that's a size thing. Messi's actually small. But with Messi, it's like there's an effortless way in which he handles the ball, the way he handles it with his feet, the way he passes, the way he shoots. And my God, I don't know if any buildup to this 38, about to turn 39-year-old global superstar. I think I saw something not that long ago that the most recognizable athletes on the planet are, in some order, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Messi, and Ronaldo. It's in some order. I think Ali is still the most recognizable athlete in the world, but he is not alive. But I think Ali will go down, at least for many of us in our lifetimes, as the most recognizable athlete in the history of the world. But currently, Messi, Ronaldo, Jordan, LeBron, I don't know what order you put them in. I don't know how it's measured, but Messi's obviously one of those people. He's in that mix of being the most recognizable athlete in the world. And I can, not knowing anything about soccer, I am a sports fan, like many of you are, and I can watch sports and say, I'm pretty sure that guy's really good. You know, I remember the first time I went to an Alex Ovechkin game his rookie year. It was early in his rookie year, and I think we did a show from MCI Center at the time. It was called MCI Center, and then we stayed for the game. It may have been his first game or second game. And I remember, telling Tony, I think the next day on Tony's show, he's like, so you went to the game. How was Ovechkin? And I said, it was so obvious early in the game that number 8 was different. Because I remember he skated really much faster and much more physically than many of the other players. Messi's different. And last night, amazingly, not only did he deliver, he had a hat trick. He scored 3 goals. And there were a couple of passes he made in that game that were so tricky and clever and smooth. He's 38. He's going to be 39. He became the oldest player to score 3 goals in a game in World Cup history. He tied a German player for the most goals ever in aggregate at the World Cup. He went in with 14 goals. He now has 16. Went in with 13. He now has 16 goals. So one more goal, he becomes the all-time World Cup scorer. By the way, this was on a day in which I was watching some of the follow-up to the Messi game last night, and they routed Algeria 3-0. They are calling it one of the great days in World Cup history, and that is because France, after being in a 0-0, that 0-0 game at halftime, came out and smoked Senegal in the second half with 2 goals by the biggest star other than Messi and Ronaldo, Mbappe. He had 2 goals in the second half of France's win over Senegal. And then this player for Norway, his name's Holland.
Erling Haaland,
Never heard of him before yesterday.
Plays for Man City, he's very big.
Apparently one of the world's biggest stars. Who does he play for? Man U?
Man City.
Man City. He had 2 goals in Norway's 4-1 win over Iraq. And then last night, you got Messi scoring 3 in their win over Algeria. It was, look, I'm typical, American sports fan, football, basketball, baseball, the biggies. And soccer's never done it for me, except for just, again, sort of the amazing way in which this gets consumed by the rest of the world is interesting to me. And has been for, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 World Cups. I've enjoyed watching them. I think it is hard sometimes to sit through, 90 minutes or 95 minutes or 96. The imprecise nature of the timing of the game drives me nuts, but the rest of the world is fine with it. So be it. It's hard because there's a lot of, they call this the continuous beautiful game or whatever. It's just not really continuous. There's a lot of, standing around, a lot of kicking the ball backwards, a lot of non-action. Of course, you can say that about football. Like over a 3-hour, 10-minute period, there is 12 minutes of action or whatever the number is. But whatever, we all have our, our what we like and what we don't like. But last night, it was hard to take your eyes off number 10. I mean, you just watched the game and you just watched him. There's something that's very interesting about watching him. I don't know anything about soccer, so you soccer people, mock me all you want, make fun of me all you want, which is fine. I'm admitting up front that I don't know much about soccer, but I am a sports fan. And there's a very calculated, methodical sort of approach to him in his game. Like he looks like he's just standing around a lot of the time. Like he literally looks like he's just kind of biding his time, jogging a little bit here and there, sometimes just walking. And there's like this, all of a sudden he sees something develop and his anticipation of what, like his second goal was off of I think the goalie should have had the stop, but it came off his hands, and then the ball was sitting there right in front of the net, and Messi knocked it in for his second of his 3 goals. But like, he anticipated that was the area, the spot in which there might be a ball that's loose. And once the play developed, like, you see all of a sudden he's standing around, and then all of a sudden he starts moving in a direction in which no one else is going to. So I think there's obviously this athletic feel. Basketball, you have to have it in basketball. You've got to have the feel of spacing. Hockey, I'm sure the same thing. Football, in a lot of those positions, you have to feel the same thing. And I've always felt like that's part of like the definition of an athlete that a lot of people miss on, because people focus on, speed or quickness or size or strength or jumping ability, all those things. But it's really the best of the best have incredible feel and vision, and it leads to great anticipation of what is going to happen. And you see that with him. I see that with him. You may mock it and say, no, he's one of, like, they all have to have it or whatever. I've watched him now in a number of games over the last 10 years or whatever. And there is, like, Max, you watch a little bit of this. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, does anybody else say about Messi, like, a lot of times when you're watching him, he stands or he's walking or he's barely moving more than the rest of the players?
A big thing about him, and Alex Ovechkin's kind of done the same thing as his career has gone on. He knows when exactly to turn it on and when to conserve energy. And it's such a thin line he has to toe, but it's so impressive how he does it.
Yeah, and then the handling of the ball and the passing is really very, very different. And I've thought that in watching him over the years. I'm assuming this is going to be his last World Cup. But what was very obvious last night is that, he is certainly going to be a major force in this World Cup as Argentina tries to repeat. Remember, in 22 in Qatar, there was, Argentina with Messi, they hadn't won the World Cup since, 86, Maradona, right? Am I right about that? I believe that's true. And so he didn't have that to his, credit, on his resume, and he got it in 22. And now, they are certainly one of the favorites along with Spain and France to win this World Cup. It was really exciting to watch, very exciting to watch. And we'll wait another week to watch him play again. Ronaldo plays today as Portugal will play a game today, and this will wrap up. Today's action in the World Cup will actually wrap up the first week and all of the first games of group play. Like, for those of you not following it, there are 48 teams, most ever in the history of the World Cup, and 12 groups of 4. And in group stage, you basically play 3 games. You play the other 3 teams in your group, 12 groups. They're all lettered. And you play, essentially a game a week. So the group stage lasts, I think, nearly 3 weeks. And today is the last of the games of the first game of group stage play. And at 1:00, you get Ronaldo and Portugal against the Congo. In a game. I mean, some of the countries that are in this, it's pretty cool. And I've looked at the FIFA World Rankings. Like, New Zealand tied Iran the other night in LA. Did we talk about the Iran-New Zealand game yesterday? Because I watched that too.
Not a whole lot. I don't think we really touched.
I don't think we talked. I think I talked about it with Tommy on the podcast, because here's Iran in the World Cup playing in the United States as our country is at war with Iran. All of that is fascinating as just a standalone. What I didn't know were 2 things. One, that Los Angeles has the highest population of Iranians. Apparently, in 79, those that fled before the regime change in 79, hundreds of thousands of Iranians ended up in Los Angeles. By the way, with means, because many of them settled in Westwood and in Beverly Hills, and in other areas that are pretty affluent around the LA area. But the crowd was unbelievably pro-Iranian because all of the Iranians that live in LA were at the game. And it was actually a surprising result because Iran is ranked 20th in the world, and New Zealand is the lowest ranked team in the entire World Cup. I don't know if you knew this or not. They're ranked 85th in the world. They're the lowest ranked team. I think Curacao may be the second lowest ranked team, and they ended up in a draw. All of the games on Tuesday or Monday, excuse me, all 4 games ended in a draw. I mean, oof, snoozer. Although, they can't play the, overtimes or have the penalty kicks or whatever they call that, the extra time stuff. There's stoppage time, there's extra time, and eventually when we get to the knockout stage, there's penalty kicks to decide games because you can't have a tie in a knockout. In one and done, you can't have ties. But you can't play, these long, drawn-out affairs in this group stage. I understand that. It is a physically grueling sport. There's no doubt about it. It is. But the games on Monday, there were 4 of them, and all 4 of them ended in ties. The most shocking being Cape Verde tying Spain, who was the favorite, 0-0, 0-0. And then you had, a couple of 3 other ties as well. But last night was really very exciting theater sports-wise, watching Messi score 3 goals. And then he got pulled after the third. Because I was like, could he set because he tied the record for a hat trick in a World Cup, but could he set the record with a 4th goal? They pulled him. They were up 3-0. Look, if you've got a 3-0 lead in soccer, it's game over. If you've got a 2-0 lead, I think in soccer, more times than not, it's game over. It's one of the problems I think a lot of Americans have with soccer is that, if you score first, you got like a 90% chance of winning the game. If you score twice without the other team scoring, you might as well call it because there aren't comebacks in soccer usually. I know that there are examples of comebacks, but the strong probability is if you're up 2-0, that one's over. That one's over. And they were up 3-0, so they pulled him from the game. What is their next game? I looked at this last night. Now I'm forgetting what it was. The World Cup bracket, World Cup standings. They are in. Argentina is in Group J. They've got Austria, Jordan, and Algeria. So they've already played Algeria.
They take on Austria on Monday.
Oh, on Monday. So that's a fast turnaround. So I guess the group stage is played in 2.5 weeks, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, Austria, Argentina, 1:00 on Monday.
Yeah, the group stage ends the 27th, so next Saturday.
And the U.S. plays Friday night, right? No, Friday at 3.
Yeah, Friday.
Friday at 3 against Australia.
Lock in.
Australia's good, aren't they? I think they are.
Yeah, they just beat who did they beat? The other team in our group. I'm spacing on who. Turkey. Yeah, they beat Turkey the other night. These are the 2 teams that everybody feels like are going to come out of the group. So this will be a nice another test for the US.
I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this already. And it's not the reason that I'm paying attention to this more than maybe some of you would have anticipated, because I have paid attention to it the last several. But I'm going to the World Cup final on July 19th. I will be there in the Meadowlands, East Rutherford, New Jersey, on Sunday, July 19th for the World Cup final.
I hope you can get to the stadium, Kev.
My brother has all these things figured out. My brother is into this. He lives in Costa Rica, has for 30 years. And he is bringing his son, my nephew, and the 3 of us will be going to the World Cup final on July 19th. I would love it if Argentina was in the final, if Messi's in the final.
I'm not going to count it out.
I'm rooting for the United States to be in the final,
of
obviously.
Course.
But It's kind of a long shot, right? Although I did look at the updated odds after they won. Do you know that I believe they're like the 7th or 8th favorite right now? Is that possible? Look at the current odds to win the actual World Cup. I think the U.S. now is like the 7th or 8th favorite.
I think after they beat
here's
people really started.
Here's my blended sort of consensus odds right now that I have. France is the favorite at plus 400. Spain is at plus 540. England's at plus 700. Portugal, who plays today with Ronaldo, is plus 750. Argentina's plus 800. Oh yeah, no, I'm a little bit
I was gonna say
off.
I got Team USA at 40-1.
Yeah, 8, 9. They're the 10th favorite though, at 39-1. I have in front of me. I've got plus 3,900. They're 39-1. That is the 10th. Where they're tied with Morocco for the 10th best odds to win the World Cup. I've got to think that that's as good or as close to the top odds-wise as they've been in a World Cup. Because didn't we look at this last week? I thought we looked at this together last week, and they were very much out of 48 teams, like in the middle of the pack, like 20th, 21st, 22nd odds-wise, and now they're tied for 10th.
Yeah,
odds-wise.
That win over Paraguay really did a lot for
and Paraguay just
confidence.
Was flat out. I thought they were very poorly coached in that game. Did not think that they employed a strategy that was, the right kind of strategy against what the U.S. had employed. I'm kidding. 10th best odds. So France, Spain, England, Portugal, Argentina, Brazil, Germany, the Netherlands, then Norway. Norway's got the guy Holland. He's a big star, right?
Yeah, he's massive.
Yeah.
In stature and in star.
He's a big dude, too. How big is he?
He's like 6'4".
Well, he looks much bigger than anybody else on the field. That was the game that preceded the Argentina game, right? Last night.
Mm-hmm. He's 6'5", weighs 205.
I saw the very end of that game, and then I saw the post game leading into the Argentina-Algeria game, and they were going nuts about Holland, the Norway guy.
Yeah, he had one goal where he just walked down the goaltender, or the defender and the goaltender, and just took it from him and plunked it in the net. And it was just like, all right, this guy is he's better than everybody on this field.
But right now, the U.S. has better odds than Belgium. They're always one of the better teams. Colombia, Mexico. I mean, I think that's...
Croatians made a run a couple years ago, too.
I would like somebody who follows this to tell me if I'm right, that the U.S. right now being the 10th favorite, number 10 out of 48 teams. I know a lot of teams' odds dip because they lost and lost big. Like Curacao, I'm going to assume, is the longest shot in the field after they lost 7-1. Yeah, they are. Haiti and Curacao are the longest shots in the field. But I can't remember, like, the U.S. has never been one of the favorites ever to win the World Cup. And they're usually, in the back of the pack. They started in the middle of the pack, and here they are now in the top quarter of teams, odds-wise, to win the World Cup. God, that would be like Argentina-U.S. in the final on July 19th. That
I would hate having to root against Messi. I can tell you that.
I've already told my brother and asked him very nicely if he could just send my ticket in advance so I can have it, and then I'll meet him at the game in the event that somebody wants to offer me. Have you seen what those tickets are going for the final?
I have not seen, but I can certainly imagine the prices.
$60K plus.
Yeah, it's about right. If you wait long enough, you can get it up to 100.
Yeah, I think that would be in poor taste if I sold the ticket after being invited. That can't happen, and it won't happen. I'm actually very much looking forward to that. It's going to be a fun weekend in New York. I think we're going to do Dodgers-Yankees on Saturday.
Ooh.
The Dodgers are in town that Saturday. I'm speaking of baseball. The Nats, they won again. I mean, this team
4 in a row, baby,
right now is just on a roll. 4 in a row. They're now 4 games above 500, 6-4 over Kansas City. In the game, Curtis Mead with his 11th home run of the season. This one came in the 7th, a 3-run shot that gave the Nats a 6-3 lead. They got a really solid start again from Foster Griffin, who went 6 complete, gave up 6 hits, but just 1 earned run, struck out 6. This team's not, we're well past the, this is just, a nice little cute, small sample size run. No, they are legitimately one of those teams that has to be watched here as we will enter the second half of the season after next week in the National League. They are sitting there right now as the lone third place team in the wild card. They would, if the season ended today, they would be a wild card team. And let's see what if the season ended today, Atlanta and LA would have first round buys, and the 3 seed Milwaukee would play the Nats in the first round of in the wild card round of the National League playoffs. This is a stunning season that the Nats have put together here in the first half of their season. They did in the first half of their season back in their very first year. They ended up 12 games over 500 in the first half and ended up 500 in their very first year in 2005 here in Washington. I'm not comparing the two. I'm just mentioning that things do happen in the second half of seasons, and it's a long way to go. They've played 74 games. They're going to go ahead and play the rest of what would it be 88 games, right? 88 and 74 is 162. So but Zuckerman was telling me the other day that their schedule is actually easier, on paper in the second half of the season than it's been in the first half of the season. Man, the Nats rolling. One more with Kansas City today. They will play Kansas City at 1:05 out at the park and try to make it 5 in a row with their game today on the hill for Washington. Let me just see who's pitching today. It's not listed. We'll get it. And then they go to Tampa. I think Tampa's pretty good right now. And then they've got a 4-game set at home against the Phillies, who are also playing exceptionally well. And they're in second place in the East. They've won, I think, 7 out of their last 10. Schwarber is leading the majors in homers with 20. He had his 25th last night. Harper's played really well. The Phillies trying to chase down the Braves, who obviously started incredibly well. Should be an interesting. I mean, the Nats are 6.5 games better than the Mets in the National League East. All right, lots to get to on the show. Ben's going to join us at 11. I don't know if it'll be from Ashburn or on his way to Ashburn, but day 2 of minicamp today. Dan Quinn had an interesting answer to a question yesterday about wide receiver number 2. I want to get to that and a lot more on today's show. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. You can download the Odyssey app and listen to us wherever you are, whenever you want. You can watch this show on the Team 980 YouTube channel. And if you do watch us on the YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. That's really good for us. This from Hal in Bethesda. Hal wrote me, Kevin, I'm sick and tired of the Wemby bashing. Had a lot of those tweets and emails the last few days. I'm sick and tired of the Wemby bashing. Every young superstar in our lifetime, excuse me, of watching the NBA had moments like the moments he just went through and saw it through to championships. Jordan, LeBron, etc. You know, a friend of mine texted me because I think we talked about this yesterday as well. Been a lot of follow-up to the NBA Finals from over the weekend, Game 5, the win on Saturday night. And a friend of mine reminded me that, you know, even before Jordan's quest to finally get a title and all of the, you know, banging his head against the Pistons for those years, that Magic Johnson in 1984, Celtics Lakers, the first time that Bird's Celtics and Magic's Lakers went head to head in the NBA Finals. They met 3 times in the NBA Finals in 84, 85, and 87. The Lakers won in 85 and 87, and the Celtics won in 84 in 7 grueling games. It was the NBA sort of really coming back into vogue because the 70s were a difficult decade for the NBA, and Magic and Bird basically resurrected the league, and this was their first showdown in the finals. Now, let me just mention, Magic had already won 2 titles, and Bird had already won 1 title. Magic had, I think, the greatest closeout game in the history of the NBA playoffs, certainly the NBA Finals, when he replaced Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and played center against the 76ers in Game 6 of the 1980 NBA Finals, up 3-2 on the road in the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and went for 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. Your point guard got moved to center for the NBA's closeout game. As great as Jalen Brunson's closeout game was on Saturday night, 45 points, it's nowhere near what Magic did. All due respect to Jalen Brunson. Magic's closeout game is number 1 all time, and he was a rookie when he did it. They won the title in 80 and 82. Bird won the title in 81. The Celtics beat the Houston Rockets in 81 in the finals. Now, they would also beat the Houston Rockets in the 86 finals. That may be the greatest basketball team, NBA-wise, I've ever seen, the 86 Celtics. Just as a comparison, the Knicks just had an unbelievable run that can be quantified certainly as the greatest playoff run ever. They're not the greatest team, in my opinion, that I've ever seen. Not even close. Great team, the way they played, great run. The 86 Celtics were unbelievable. And those Lakers teams of the 80s and the Bulls teams, you know, the Lakers teams of the early 2000s, we can go through the list. There are a lot of teams, in my view, that were better championship teams than these New York Knicks. But in terms of how they played in the postseason and their run, and look, there are a lot of reasons for it. You know, they played an Eastern Conference that was hardly what, you know, you would call murderer's row. I mean, they destroyed the 76ers in 4 straight after the 76ers took out the Celtics. That's true, but were also exhausted and injured. They took out Cleveland after they went through a 7-game grueling series with Detroit. I mean, Cleveland, as Tommy told me the other day, they were a conscientious objector for the most part. And they're just losers, you know, in terms of Harden, et cetera, on that team. They didn't have championship mettle at all. Now, they played a great young team in the NBA Finals and a phenomenal defensive team in the NBA Finals, but they're not the greatest team ever. They're just not. But a friend of mine reminded me that when the Lakers lost the 84 NBA Finals to the Celtics in a 7th and deciding game, that people started to refer to Magic Johnson as Tragic Magic because he did not play well in those NBA Finals. In his first matchup with Larry Bird, he couldn't make shots. He couldn't hit big shots. He didn't play well. Clutch moments. This was not the baby hook Magic Johnson game 4, in the Garden. That came in 87. Magic in 84 was not good. Now, the big difference between, say, him and Wemby or him and LeBron is he had already won 2 titles and had already had the greatest closeout clutch performance in NBA history as a rookie. But it is true that people were really down on Magic Johnson. And look, that was his 5th season in the league at that point. He was still a young player. He would evolve into a better and more consistent offensive player and scorer, which he wasn't at that point. He wasn't. He was a phenomenal, facilitator, passer. I think he's the greatest passer in the history of my lifetime watching basketball. Magic was never a great defender, but Bird wasn't either. Back to Hal and Bethesda, I'm sick and tired of the Wemby bashing. Every young superstar in our lifetime of watching the NBA had moments like the moments he just went through and saw it through to championships, Jordan, LeBron, etc. It just made me think of the text that my friend sent me yesterday reminding me, Magic too went through a lot of the criticism and the bashing and the scrutiny. Big difference again. Magic had 2 rings to his credit at that point. Magic also played on much better teams. I mean, he had Kareem. He had, early on, the first 2 titles actually came with Norm Nixon in the backcourt with him. And the rest of the titles came with Byron Scott next to him. But the first 2 were Norm Nixon in 80 and in 82, and guys like Jamal Wilkes. I mean, Worthy was not on that 80 championship team. He wasn't on the 82 championship team, but obviously Worthy would come later. Kareem, Worthy, Michael Cooper, Byron Scott, Magic. But even the players those first 2 years, Kareem, Wilkes, Norm Nixon, they were really good. But anyway, back to, responding to Hal. I think, the Wemby bashing, Hal, is because he got elevated so quickly to a level that was just probably unfair to him, although he embraced it. I mean, remember, he went on a rant about why he deserved the MVP this year over SGA. Wemby was certainly feeling himself and in many ways full of himself. And I think that's part of the story here is the basketball part. We found out that he was flawed and limited offensively, much more so than it seemed to be 2 weeks ago. Much more so than it seemed to be 2 weeks ago. Now, for a lot of people, I think for me, it was that Minnesota series where I started to say, I remember coming in here one day and I'm like, I'm going to say this and people are going to be pissed. But I said, he's starting to irritate me. And it was, some of the flagrants, the Naz Reid near knockout elbow, the fact that he's not a guy that seems to want to play down low. He fancies himself to be more of a guard, more of a Kevin Durant kind of a player, guy that wants to put it between his legs 4 times and shoot threes. And then, you got into some of the, boasting. And I'm not saying that, a guy with an edge and a guy that's as competitive, because here's the thing with Wemby, Wemby it didn't cower like LeBron did with Miami in that first year. Wemby was all in for the fight all along. I think he crossed the line, and I think he is a dirty player as we speak, and hopefully he'll grow out of that because it hurts his team. But I love his competitive, badass, nature. I've mentioned this many times, but it's one of my favorite Coach Thompson lines. Certainly imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And so many of us at this radio station that had a chance to be around Coach Thompson for all of those years, we have so many of his sayings. But one of my favorites, and I bet you after watching Wemby in this postseason, if Coach were still around, he would say what he said about a lot of players, including players he coached. I'd much rather have to tame a fool than resurrect a corpse. And that's kind of the idea. You never want the guy that is innately soft, innately non-competitive, or doesn't have that, that edge. Wemby has it probably too much of it right now. Easier to tame a fool, rather tame a fool than resurrect a corpse. I remember him saying that all the time, and it just rings so true about, players. Like, just think about the guy. A lot of that is just so innate. It's almost impossible to coach up intense, competitive fierceness. That's innate. So he'd rather tame a fool than have to resurrect a corpse. And Wemby's got some of that right now. But I think how the biggest thing with Wemby beyond the basketball limitations that we realized, and it's going to be, I think, very interesting to watch his evolution as an offensive basketball player, to see what he becomes, to see what he desires, to see what the organization wants him to become. Because right now, he doesn't have a go-to. We don't really know what he is offensively. I mean, there have been nights where you're like, it doesn't matter what he is, and if it can't be defined, it doesn't matter. He's just dominant, like he was in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals against Oklahoma City. But that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. But I think the sick and tired of Wemby bashing is much more about, his over and over dirty play, his over and over proclaiming his team's the best team. They're not worried, and they're going to, win against the Knicks. And by the way, following it up by disappearing in the most critical moments of those games in the finals. It wasn't because he was afraid. All right. LeBron looked completely and utterly out of sync and hesitant in 2011 against the Mavericks. You go back and you watch Game 3, he literally, every time he touches the ball, he throws it right back to whomever passed it to him. He didn't want to have any part of deciding those games. He grew out of it pretty quickly and became a big-time clutch performer, no doubt. But that's not what Wemby just went through. Wemby was in for the fight the whole way through. But Wemby ran out of gas in a lot of those games, and Wemby didn't have go-to moves offensively. He didn't have a go-to offensive game to, thwart the comeback in Game 4, to get it done down the stretch in Game 5, to keep him alive. I mean, there was a lot of yapping from Wemby, a lot of yapping, and not much delivering in the finals. I think that's a big part of why the narrative changed on him so quickly. Telling Mitchell Robinson, I'm in your head, talking after games as if we're good, we're absolutely the better team, and that's fine, but you better deliver. And he came up way short in the finals. But like I've said all week, 22, be patient, things change, and I bet they'll change with him. And I bet you 5 years from now, 10 years from now, he's one of the most beloved athletes in the world and great with titles. Although I am picking OKC right now to win next year's NBA title. All right, we're going to get to some of the things that Dan Quinn said yesterday at Minicamp next.
aside from Terry, this wide receiver group, who stood out to you? Who's impressed you kind of during these practices?
Yeah, a number of them have. I would say on the outside, Van Jefferson has been somebody that's really caught my eye. Having Diami back has been excellent as well. I hit him up after practice the other day. There's just like a good intensity about him, a good mindset of where he's at. And so he's somebody that I've been super impressed with just off the bat. It's good to see Lane and McCaffrey making their jumps in. So those are a few that jump to mind. But having Diami back, a fuel of speed, having Van here, he's an excellent route runner going into it. And then inside in the slot, those would be the two that jump out.
So I always these are the things where I think, you can spend a little bit of time this time of year just chatting about what a coach said when asked a direct question. Scott Abraham, I believe, asked the question about, receivers other than Terry that have stood out. And I think sometimes, when you're asked for something specific like that, the head coach, and he goes to the first thing that pops into his mind, there's a bit of a tell there. That could change. I mean, Van Jefferson may not make the team. But right now, the first guy that popped into his mind was Van Jefferson. And I think that's interesting because when they signed Van Jefferson, I said to all of you, he's been a player that throughout his career, especially when he was with the Rams, and that's where he spent most of his career, and where he had some meaningful, seasons and won a Super Bowl. I always felt watching him, and I was a bit of a fan of him coming out of Florida. He was drafted in the second round of the 2020 draft. I always felt like he was one of those guys that just played bigger than he was. And when they signed him a few months back, I was fully expecting to open up his bio and see a guy that was 6'2" or 6'3". He's 6'1", which is exactly what I've always thought, which is he looks bigger and plays bigger than 6'1". He's a very good route runner, played obviously in Sean McVay's system, so he's going to be familiar with, what they're trying to do offensively under David Blau. One of those guys that was good at high point catching, hands catching, contested catching, had a really good game in a playoff game during COVID in 2020 at Lambeau against the Packers. I remember that game very well because I was on the Rams plus the points. Did not get it done. The Packers won the game by 2 touchdowns. The Rams were getting 6.5, but it was a close game. And one of the reasons it was a close game is that Van Jefferson actually played really well in that game. And, he didn't have a great season. The Super Bowl season, he had 50 catches. That's his best season. 50 catches, 6 touchdowns in 2021 for the Rams. And during the postseason, when they won the Super Bowl, he ended up catching 9 balls for 102 yards, no touchdowns, but had 5 first down catches. And I think that's one of the things, like Treylon Burks, and Van Jefferson are guys that, Keenan Allen's been out there as a free agent. Big fan of Keenan Allen, always have been. But I think maybe they look at, Treylon Burks, maybe even more so than Van Jefferson, as a possible Keenan Allen type. But I thought it was interesting and notable anyway. I'll ask Ben when he joins us next. But I think it was notable that the first guy he said when asked about receivers other than Terry, he mentioned Van Jefferson. He also mentioned Diami, and then he mentioned a few others, but then came back to Van Jefferson. So, look, the play-by-play of this stuff this time of year, you're not getting anything out of it, trust me. But something like that may have been a bit of a tell on where they are at wide receiver too. Maybe Van Jefferson has a chance to make this football team. There was no guarantee when they signed him, but I always felt like he was and looked like a player that should be in the league, and he has been. He's bounced around a little. Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Tennessee last year, and hasn't had a season anywhere close to the season he had with the Rams during their 2021 Super Bowl run. Ben Standing from Ashburn, I think that's where he is, next. Ben's joining us here midweek because Minicamp has and will reach its midpoint here in a few hours. And Dan Quinn spoke yesterday. Jaden Daniels, right, expected to meet with the media today. What time is that, Ben? Ben, you there? Do we have Ben?
We did a minute ago.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I got you now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. It was going in and out for a second. Don't know why. Who knows?
All right. So we have Jaden speaking today. At what time?
After practice, maybe that's like around 2:00, give or take. Jaden's talking Laramie Tunsil, Bill Krosky, Merritt. So, guys we have not heard from yet. Those three in particular are interesting.
Okay. I just played the soundbite where he mentioned Van Jefferson before anybody else when he was asked about wide receivers other than Terry. I always look for those things just to see what pops into a head coach's mind first. I thought that was interesting. Van Jefferson, Cager and Jefferson have been the people that I have been interested in offensively because I thought that Cager was somebody they liked last year during the summer. And I think Van Jefferson's had some pretty decent games and had a decent season in 2021 with the Rams when they won the title. Did that strike you as telling at all?
I mean, to a degree, like you said, what I like to ask questions of, like, let him fill in the blanks, right? And, that was a question. I think Scott Abraham, just what do you think of the receivers who aren't Terry McLaurin? And that was one of the names he came up with. And, I think we talked about Van Jefferson the other day because when I wrote my story about can they, create a Frankenstein kind of number two receiver based on the different pieces that they have. Van Jefferson was the guy who was like the hands guy. He doesn't drop the ball.
Right.
He has been a reliable player. He also has been, injured and has been, a little more buried towards the back of some depth charts and things like that. So, I'm not sure. It's a little surprising that he says it, but I kind of understand why a guy like Van Jefferson might appeal to Dan Quinn. I think the question is, not including the long shots, the practice squad type guys. There's basically 7 receivers, and typically I would project like 6 make the team. So the question is, who would be the odd man out? And Van Jefferson, until otherwise, is probably the default choice, just because he's not been here. There's a lesser upside than, say, a Treylon Burks. But yeah, I think he's a guy that has stood out a little bit, and clearly, if the head coach has mentioned him, you gotta keep that in mind.
Let's say they keep 7. You want to do this right now? Let's just do it. If they keep 7, Terry, Antonio Williams, Jalen Lane because he's the punt returner, De'Ami Brown for sure. That's 4. Treylon Burks, I believe, because they liked him last year and they ended up re-signing him, although there's no lock there, but I'll put him 5, and then we're into 6 and 7. So it's between McCaffrey, Jefferson, Jacoby Jones, the kid that Terry's been raving about, the undrafted free agent Jaden Bradley from UNLV. Give me 6 and 7. Did I get I guess Treylon Burks isn't a lock, but it seems like he might be. Did I get the first 5 right?
Well, I think the first 4. I think the McCaffrey versus Treylon Burks is interesting. I mean, 1, McCaffrey is the guy they drafted. 2, as a kick returner, he has done a pretty good job the last couple of years. I know that's not why they drafted him,
True.
Per se, but that is a thing. And he has 2 years left on his rookie deal, where Burks is only here for a 1-year deal. So to whatever degree that would matter.
Okay.
So I do think, and also, Burks has been back there a little bit for punt returns. I get him just as in a case of emergency, but otherwise I don't know that he's helping much on special teams, whereas at least McCaffrey's returning.
All right, so Terry
there,
McLaurin, Antonio Williams, De'Ami Brown, and Jalen Lane are 4 givens, correct?
I would think so. So, yes.
Okay. So give me your guess on the next 3. Are you saying it's either McCaffrey or Burks, one or the other?
Yeah, I mean, until we get to training camp, it's hard. I do think Jaden Bradley looked pretty good, but we see receivers every year, right, in this situation,
Of course.
who show something and we're like, oh, well, then it doesn't pan out like, Jacory Brooks did last year. So I'm not ready to put in any of those sort of guys. I did like Jacoby Jones too last year, but again, need to see more.
Too.
So I think here's the interesting question. If they only keep the 6, right? Like I said, today I might have to say Van Jefferson, but I feel less comfortable about that, especially when Quinn mentions him. Here's what I think gets really interesting though, Kevin, is like, what if the Brandon Ayuk thing actually does happen?
Right.
Then what? Now you're looking at 2 guys who might get cut. And again, Van Jefferson probably is not going to raise a lot of eyebrows here, but then who? I do wonder, is that possibly Traylon Burks? Again, maybe it's not. Maybe he crushes it all summer. There's athletic reasons why you'd be interested in him, but there's also some inconsistency. It's not like he obviously had a hot market. He got back here pretty easily, it felt like. So that would be the interesting one to me, is if Ayuk actually is here and they only keep 6 receivers, which again is typically what I would project, then who is gone? And I like I said, right now, I'm sure people would say, well, you got to keep Burks and move on from McCaffrey. I don't know that I'm seeing that one quite yet.
Yeah, and I think to your point too, 6 over, say, like extending it to 7 is just the idea that they will likely be in more 12 and 13 personnel. So it'll be tight ends that get kept. And then you look at their running backs and it's like Krosky, Merritt, Rashad White, and I think McNichols, because of his special teams play, are probably 3 givens. And then maybe, Katron Allen, Jerome Ford are the other 2, right? Am I missing anybody? I don't think I'm missing anybody.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. So, like, I have not done a full 53 yet.
Get on it, because we're all living for your 53s.
Of course. Probably after camp next week, something to look forward to. But just looking right now, I mean, I think one thing to say, in the context of, how good is this team going to be, I think we always make a big deal about certain choices they have to make at the end of these decisions. When they make the 53, and oftentimes we're just kind of stretching it. Well, okay, this guy, boy, how are they going to let that guy go? I think this year there's a legit, like, 5 or 6 guys who we're going to be like, wow, that guy got cut. Okay. Like, there's a lot of guys on, like, the defensive line that can't all make the team. Mm-hmm. We just went through the receiver. You mentioned the running backs. Like, every year I probably have Jeremy McNichols on the outside only to look like an idiot because they clearly value him, which I totally understand. But, like, they also keep all their draft picks. Are we saying Katron Allen isn't ahead of McNichols most likely in that pecking order, or do they have to keep 4 of the guys, right? Are they even keeping the 3rd quarterback? That's what they've done so far. They drafted the kid out of Rutgers, but again, where is this kind of, where do they have to make some tough calls? So that's why it's hard for me to see them keeping 7 receivers, and then therefore it's going to be a really interesting conversation. Also, even like the safety room, right? I mean, if they keep 6, it seems like that we can probably look at that pretty simply. It's like 5 guys who were back from last year and Nick Cross. But if they only keep 5 and 5 corners to 10 defensive backs, then somebody from the Tyler Owens, Percy Butler, Jeremy Reeves, et cetera. Jeremy Reeves isn't going anywhere, but you know what I mean? But, like, somebody is not going to be there. So I think they have a lot more questions at the back of the roster than they have in recent years.
Okay. I hope you're right, because that would speak to them just having better football players. It doesn't have to speak to that. It could be, a lot of mediocre players that are just difficult to choose between. But I hope it's because they've upgraded the talent. You wrote in your, summary of minicamp so far just about the cornerback position and, what they're going to end up doing there. I'm curious as to how, you think they are viewing Witherspoon and the ad of Witherspoon, because I've heard that he's really a competitor and they love, like, his fiery kind of, competitive, part of his game he's a given at this point, but how much do you think they like Witherspoon and the addition of him?
Is it Robertson or Witherspoon? Because I don't know the Witherspoon. Okay, well, I don't know.
No, Robertson, the Detroit guy. My fault. The Detroit guy.
Yeah. No,
my fault.
Yeah, for sure. No. I would think he's in there. I think I think they are probably still, and we're still trying to figure out exactly where are they going to play everybody? Both Sanderstill and Robertson, like on the surface, you would look at them as like slot guys. But,
Right.
In this setup, at least one of them is going to have to play on the outside and probably both to various points. I do think the question becomes after the top three, including Trey Amos, is Witherspoon is the guy who's been around the league, good size, all that. But, he's not played. He only played, I think, 6 games last year. It's the kind of guy, like, there's no ceiling, right? He is who he is. The question is, can you do better? Same thing with sort of Antonio Hamilton. That's where there's a lot of guys. And I asked Dan Quinn yesterday when he said, so the point of practice here this week, or at least yesterday, but I think the whole week is they want to give more reps to guys who are sort of the back end of the roster, both to see what they have, but also to make sure that these guys are as competitive as possible so that when they get to training camp, they're giving the starters and the high rotation guys as much of a, competitive practice as possible, right? So that corner, so Dan Quinn said that one of the groups he's looking at, along with quarterback and running back in this regard, is corner. And there are like a lot of there's like 4, 5, 6 guys who are like either it's been in the league for a little bit, but they haven't really latched on, or Carlin Viggers was a UDFA practice squad guy last year. Fred Davis, the second out of Northwestern, is that guy this year. And I kind of wonder if one of those 2 younger guys knows enough that they can sneak on because, like I said, they can go to Witherspoon, they can go to Hamilton, but you kind of know what they are. There's not a lot of upside there. Do they seek that? Obviously, there's special teams factors and locker room factors and all that, but that to me is an interesting scenario that we'll see play out in camp.
I loved your write-up. Ben does such a great job covering this team with his Substack column, and I would urge all of you to subscribe. You can just link to it from his X account at Ben Standig. But I loved the section that you wrote about involving this guy from Northwestern, the corner Fred Davis, the second from Northwestern. He had a very, very good quote about a play that he made yesterday. Will you tell everybody about it?
Kevin, my memory is shot. Which
okay.
He and I talked for like 7 minutes. What quote did I use? I don't remember.
So he made apparently he's got a 38-inch vertical. He's 6'1". Yeah. He leapt into the air and made a play on a throw towards the sideline. This is where
he said he's not going to get yelled at?
Well, he was asked, I guess maybe you asked him about it, and he just said, saw ball, got ball. That was the quote. And then apparently they're not supposed to actually make plays on throws. Is that the deal? And so he was.
That is the deal. And, obviously that's a bizarre, like he and I talked for several minutes. I actually put the interview on my podcast, the most recent one, because I enjoyed the conversation that much. It's a very weird deal, right? Here you are, this undrafted free agent. You're trying to show that you can make the team, go get the ball, and then the coaches are saying, well, actually, we need the offense to be able to go through their process. So don't, if the ball's in sort of a competitive situation, don't make a play on it for now. So that's weird. He even says flat out, it's super weird. But when this opportunity came up, the ball was thrown out wide. It was, it was his or nobody's, and he made a really nice jump, caught it at the high point. It's one of those plays where, like, you can't get overly worked up over one play, but it was the type of instinct and athletic play. They're like, oh, okay, this guy does have something there.
Well, and especially when the offense isn't expecting the defense to be able to make plays on the ball. That may have factored into it.
Like I said, in this case, it was more just like he got it wasn't so much that he defended the receiver. It was more like the ball was thrown away and he made a play on it. And obviously this is a team that has struggled to create turnovers significantly, right?
So let's not practice them.
Well, something like that. It is a weird, but I remember I went back and looked at when they announced all the UDFAs, I went back and looked at who I wrote about. And I remember I wrote them sort of in like, here are the guys I think are most interesting. Number 1 was the kicker, and number 2 was Fred Davis. Just based on what I had read about him. So, again, in a situation where after the top 3 corners, I feel like things are open, this is a guy that's interesting. Again, he played 4 colleges. He had 0 interceptions in college, which is very weird. But, he stood out yesterday, and I thought it was worth noting.
Talking to Ben Standig, of course, in Ashburn for Minicamp Day 2. So tell everybody what Quinn said about not cutting Minicamp short, and any sort of significance attached to that?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, we've seen a couple of teams out west just cancel Minicamp
Right.
altogether. Those, of course, are teams that are definitively Super Bowl contenders, veteran teams. Like, so they, they're doing whatever they're doing, and Washington's coming off a 5-win season. So I don't see that happening. Now, the point of cutting it a day early would largely be so everybody could go on their merry way with vacation. This is not something to do with football, but they're doing some sort of like a family event, barbecue, practice. So nobody's going anywhere. So that's also kind of another reason that's no point in canceling the practice. But yeah, I mean, look, this is a team that needs the work. I mean, who could say otherwise? And the point, again, that what Quinn is looking to do here, he said, is give the guys who have not typically been getting a ton of reps more reps because they want to see what they have. And obviously, and he also said, we don't know when, but we know we're going to need depth because injuries are going to happen, which, of course, this team knows very well after last year. And that's what this is all about. You got to figure out who you have, because once they get to training camp, Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin and Owe and everybody else, they're going to be out there as much as it makes sense for them to be out there. Not that that's no more the time for the deep cuts to get work. So this is their time to shine now, and they're giving them that opportunity.
All right. Tell us about the two kickers, Jake Moody and the Iowa undrafted free agent Drew Stevens. This is something that you can gauge something about because they're actually kicking and they're competing, and that'll happen obviously through training camp and through preseason games. But do you have any sense of who might have the upper hand at this point, or maybe it's we got to wait till preseason games at the least, very least?
Yeah, to your point that we can say, okay, well, so and so made X amount of kicks, that would be a pretty good marker. They've now had 10 practices starting with the OTAs, and we've only seen 4. So I don't know what happened in the other 6. But in the ones that we've had, including yesterday, going into yesterday, I think they were fairly even in terms of the just makes misses. Yesterday, Drew Stevens going second made all 6 of his kicks. They started at the 28 and then go back 5 yards until they get to the 53. Moody missed from 38 and 48. I think to me, again, it's only one practice and we didn't see a lot of the other ones. But in general, Moody's got to be more accurate than Stevens because Stevens has the bigger leg.
Yeah.
The other day we spoke with Larry Izzo, the special teams coordinator, and he was asked 6 different ways, what are you looking for here? And he basically was like, look, we could cut to the chase, make the kicks. Beyond that, we'll go from there. If you're not accurate, then nothing else really matters. And so if Stevens with what looks to be like the bigger leg is equal to or is making more, then then he's going to have a good leg up, no pun intended. But we'll see. Again, this is one where they'll have a long runway here, every single day of practice. They can go through these same exercises and do it again. And, I don't know what's happened again on the days we're not there. But Stevens has looked, if you're rooting for the guy who might be, I don't want to go crazy and say this team's Brandon Aubrey, but somebody who would give them the opportunity to take a 55 or 60 yarder where we have really not seen that around here for a long time. And obviously this is a new era in the NFL where that's happening more regularly. Then he looks to be the more interesting of the guy. Again, Moody was a 3rd round pick not that long ago by the guy who's the GM of this team.
Yeah. All right.
He has a lot of favors for that.
What'd you say?
No, I was saying obviously Adam Peters was with the 49ers when they drafted him. So,
yeah.
And then they brought him in. Got some fondness for him.
Yeah, and I think for whatever reason, and it tends to be, I think, probably verifiably true, is that kickers usually don't end up becoming great with the team that they initially are on. It ends up being 2 or 3 teams later, and it has to sort of evolve. It's like they're not ready, as a rookie or as a young player to win an NBA championship. They have to be in the league and take their hits and develop some scars before they end up becoming really good kickers. And Moody now is with team number 3, I think, if not 4 at this point. So we'll see.
3,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when I talked to Stevens at that rookie camp, I was like, look, obviously pressure is what this whole deal is, your position. I was like, it feels like from the outside, as the kicker for Iowa, who scores no points, your kicks every time felt like they had to be more pressure. he's like, well, look, obviously I expect to make every one, but yeah, sure, there were definitely times where it's like, if I don't make this, what are we doing? So, he may be coming into this with a little bit more of those, scars to a degree, because he's, again, to a certain extent, Iowa's offense was the kicker. So, that may be kept for a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. They were a little bit better offensively this year than they've been, but yeah, he was a big part of what they did. All right. I wanted to just switch subjects because Ben is launching a Wizards newsletter. And he's already written about next week's draft. Ben covered the Wizards through, the Gilbert Arenas era, through the John Wall, Bradley Beal era. He's got, sources around the league. And he, like me, would like to see the Wizards become an actual championship contender at some point in our lifetime. So, tell me right now, as we sit here, we'll know we'll know a week from today who they selected last night. Week from last night is the first round of the draft. Tell me what you're thinking based on the people you've talked to.
Yeah. So, last week, obviously we've been all discussing in various ways the combination of A.J. DeBonta, forward from BYU, the Kansas guard, Darren Peterson, Duke forward, Carlos Boozer, and to a lesser degree, North Carolina forward Caleb Wilson, but he's probably a distant fourth, especially if you're the Wizards. To me, and I think to others, if you're going to be in this position that the Wizards have been angling to get into, a potential, I don't want to go like franchise-changing player, but somebody who could be a multi-time All-Star that could legitimately reshape the direction of this team, especially with the other kids, you want to shoot for the upside. Cameron Boozer, the analytics love him, but he's not an upside darling because he doesn't have some of the physical tools. So DeBonta has a lot of that. He's 6'9", lengthy. He can guard 3 spots. He can play 4. His shooting is pretty good for where it is. He needs to work on his 3-point touch a little bit, but he is the guy that I think most people say they would take at 1. Now, part of that is he's got the best combination of ceiling and floor. Whereas Darren Peterson, because he had such a bizarre year at Kansas where he missed a bunch of games and left other games with significant cramping, and there was, just odd circumstances to the point where even his head coach at one point after a game was like, "Oh, I guess we're not done with this."
Very frustrated after the Arizona when he backed out 20 minutes before the game. Very frustrated.
Yeah. So that to me stood out in real time. The other thing though is I've talked to multiple people who just sort of, as they're discussing this and while acknowledging the question, say, but he might be Kobe Bryant. And I'm like, what? You can't just throw that in there. What? He might be Kobe Bryant. That's like, and of course they don't necessarily mean a top 10 player, but stylistically, his ability to score is unparalleled, it feels like, in this draft. And it even with a lot of prospects in recent years, he could play both guard spots, but it seems like he's more of a 2 than a 1, stylistically, mentally, all that. So if the Wizards are looking at this guy like, wow, how on earth are we passing on this offense? And the question is, can they make sense of what the heck happened at Kansas? Peterson told ESPN at some point that it was an issue with he was taking creatine and his body was basically, I guess, rejecting it or just not taking it in well. Nobody was saying that during the season. This has only been said after the fact. So who knows if that's the real deal? If they're confident with that excuse makes sense, then maybe he gets a more favorable look for the Wizards. I also would just say, to this point, I have not cared 1 second about what position anybody is for the Wizards. Just get the talent and figure it out. Now where they're at, it's still somewhat that, but DeBonta would be a better fit for what they have. They have a lot of guards and wings, and DeBonta can play sort of the 3-4, and that would be a better fit with Sarr and Anthony Davis if he's around. So, again, if Peterson's all that, you take him and figure it out. But that would be, I think DeBonta would be my lean based on everything that I have heard.
If Darren Peterson had played in every game this year and had played the minutes he was supposed to play, and there wasn't this mystery around him, I don't think there'd be even a debate at all. I think he'd be the number one pick in this draft. And you only have to go back and watch a couple of his games. For those of you that are interested in what the Wizards will be choosing from, let's just say it is DeBonsa and Peterson. If you go back and watch the game that he played against DeBonsa, they played BYU. It was January, February timeframe. Both teams were borderline top 10. He had like 18 or 20 points in the first half, and it was like mesmerizing to watch him. He was the best player on the floor in that game, including DeBonsa. And then he didn't play basically in the second half. He pulled himself out of the game and didn't play because he had, wasn't feeling well. Now, they had a big lead in that game, but then all of a sudden BYU makes this comeback and he doesn't budge. And he's sitting at the end of the bench and people are wondering, you got to be kidding me, dude. We're blowing this lead. We need you in the game. And he's nowhere to be found. And yet the first half, because I remember that was Peterson versus DeBonsa. It was like must watch. And Peterson was so good. I'm going to pull up the actual box score because I think he had 20 in the first half and basically didn't play in the second half.
It was definitely something along those lines. And
90 to 82, Kansas held on. They were up 20 at halftime. He had 18 in the first half on 6 of 8 shooting, 3 for 5 behind the arc. And by the way, had multiple steals, 3 steals in the game. He's very good as an off-ball defender, which I don't know how many people have talked about as it relates to his game. If he didn't have all this mystery around him, he'd be the guy that everybody would say has the most upside and has a chance to be a multi-time, all-star and maybe a future MVP contender. But we have that. It sucks that they have that, swirling around him because it's obviously going to influence, teams. He only met with the Wizards. What did you make of that?
Yeah, kind of bizarre. I know some people inferred it to mean, well, that must mean he thinks the Wizards are taking him. I don't know that I'm buying that. I think that the Utah at number 2 situation is not – I would imagine that his side either thinks that, A, it's a bad fit. Utah's got their own Keontae George, a guy who plays similar position, has been in the league a little bit and maybe up for a contract soon. But also there's a thought that Utah might go with Cameron Boozer. Not that this should matter a ton, but his dad, of course, longtime NBA player Carlos Boozer, is with the Jazz. He's in their front office. And if they're, if the analytics, if they care about the analytics, then Boozer's going to be probably the higher rated player. So maybe this is Peterson's way of being like, I'm going to dump you before you dump me. But that said, I don't look at it as that this means that the Wizards are taking him. I don't believe that because I don't believe that the Wizards would have said anything, even if they were going down that route. So yeah, I mean, like I said, it really does come down to, can the Wizards explain credibly what the heck happened last year? If they feel comfortable with that, then you're right. He may very well be the pick, and they'll figure out what to do with Trae Young or Trae Johnson later. But otherwise, this is where again the DeBonsa part is. He's got the high ceiling and he's got a high floor, and that is maybe the differentiator ultimately if they don't feel comfortable.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it. Talk to you end of the week.
Look forward to it, as always, Kevin. See you.
Ben Standing, everybody. Stephen Goff has covered soccer forever for the Washington Post, for Yahoo now. He's out in L.A. with the U.S. team. He's going to join us next.
chalk, Algeria.
We opened the show talking about Messi's mesmerizing performance last night in Argentina's 3-0 win over Algeria at Arrowhead in Kansas City. By the way, I did look this up, Max. Kansas City, the number one viewing market of the World Cup in the U.S., a hotbed for soccer, and the place was insane last night, starting with the national anthems. Somebody who knows a lot more about this sport and this event is joining us right now. Stephen Goff covered soccer forever for the Washington Post. He's with Yahoo Sports now. You can follow him on X at Soccer Insider. He's covered 9 World Cups. I did the math during the break. That means 1990 in Italy was the first men's World Cup you covered?
No, 94.
94
was the first one. So your math's a little bit off, but close.
It is off. 94, of course, was in the U.S. And we had games at RFK. And we had games at RFK.
Yeah. Long live RFK.
So tell me about Messi's performance last night in some sort of historical soccer context.
I mean, you could start with the fact that the guy has never had a hat trick before in the World Cup. Hat tricks are rare in a World Cup. They're rare in soccer, of course. So, and he's, how old is he? Almost 39. Pretty extraordinary. He's really cementing his place as the greatest player of all time. And he's doing it here on U.S. soil at this World Cup. And of course, he's doing it on a weekly basis for Inter Miami in MLS.
Steven, is it pretty much, something that soccer people agree on, that Messi is the greatest of all time? Greater than Pele, greater than some of the all-time greats? Is he the GOAT? Do most people agree with that?
I think we've reached a point, yes. After he won the World Cup in Qatar, I think that kind of put him over the top. There was always that question whether he could win the World Cup with Argentina. He did it. He did it in spectacular fashion, considering his performance. The number of Champions League titles he's won, the number of goals, the fact that he's done it at big clubs, the fact that he continues to do it at an advanced stage for an athlete, it all adds up. It's hard to compare generations. Pele never played in Europe. The game was very different back then. The money was still in South America, so he didn't need to go to Europe. So that's part of it. Maradona's part of that conversation. Johan Cruyff, who played in Washington for a couple of years, is in that conversation as well. So, I think we're at the point now where Messi is number one.
I'm a child of the 70s, Steven. I remember going to a birthday party at RFK to watch Johan Cruyff, and the stadium was filled for Cruyff. He was a huge Dutch superstar who was part of that 70s, that first, sort of attempt to make this sport big. And Pele was, along with, what was the other guy's name that played for the Cosmos? The German?
Beckenbauer. Franz Beckenbauer. Yeah. So I think Messi stands alone now.
So I was trying to describe something, and I want you to help me with this. I said this probably the last World Cup or maybe 2 World Cups ago when I watched Messi. It's like I don't know anything about soccer. I'll be the first to admit it, but it was very obvious that there was something different about him. And in watching last night's game, which I watched start to finish, it got hyped, this game last night. Messi, starting this World Cup at 38 as the defending champions for Argentina. There's something about him stylistically, and you can tell me if I'm off or if it's not different, but it seems to be different to me. There's a very methodical kind of effortless way in which he plays. You're watching him, and my eyes were on him a lot of the game, and they have been every time I've watched him. He's not necessarily always moving. There's a bit of a slower, methodical gait with him. And then all of a sudden, he's in the right spot at the right time. Like the anticipation, the athletic anticipation seems to be off the charts. Am I right that his style is like also, forget the fact that he's the best ever, but he's also got a very unique style, at least when I watch him?
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. And, with age, certainly his game has changed, just like in any sport. A pitcher, an older pitcher learns different tricks. And he's the same way. He's looking for the space. He has an incredible brain. His mind is always moving. He knows where to be. He anticipates. And then the technical ability takes over. And, he's still able to place a ball exactly where it needs to be. The Algerian goalkeeper was not world-class last night. Nonetheless, Messi was
Zindane's son,
still
right?
Brilliant. Yeah, that's another great angle. That Zinedine Zidane, the French legend, has a son who's a goalkeeper who played in the French system, and then he switched over to Algeria because he has Algerian roots, family roots. So that was another layer to it.
Yesterday, I heard people saying last night that yesterday was one of the great days in the history of the World Cup because of France's second half, Mbappe scoring 2 goals. This guy from Norway, who's a big star, Holland, scoring 2 goals. Messi capping it off with 3. Is that fair, or is that hyperbole?
Yeah, it was a pretty extraordinary day given the star power on that day. And, it's no coincidence in some ways that they all played on this day. It was pretty amazing. And, because of Messi's competitive spirit, he knew what these guys did. Certainly whether they scored or not, he's going to do what he's going to do. But, he's got a bit of Michael Jordan in him where he has that killer instinct and he wants to be the best. It was incredible. And then today it sets up well because 2 more great scorers are in action. Harry Kane for England, and who's the other? Who am I forgetting?
Ronaldo.
Yeah, Ronaldo, of course. Yeah, I mean Ronaldo's kind of a weird situation. He's older than Messi, not necessarily a starter anymore for Portugal, but still one of the legends of the game.
So we're going to finish off sort of this first round of one game in group stage today with the games that'll be played, the 4 games that will be played. And then the U.S. will take center stage again on Friday night against Australia in Seattle. I mentioned this earlier in the show. I have no idea if I'm right, but right now, kind of the consensus odds, Stephen, the U.S. is basically 39 or 40 to 1. That's the 10th best odds currently to win the World Cup. They're actually tied with Morocco. They're both at 39 to 1. So there are essentially only 9 teams of this 48-team World Cup that have better odds. To me, it seems like maybe this odds-wise is the best chance they've ever had. Am I right or wrong?
On paper, this is the best U.S. team based on where these guys play professionally. You can learn a lot about a team's hopes and outlook by the clubs that they play for. If you look at France's lineup yesterday, the starting lineup was all Barcelona and Real Madrid and some of the other Paris Saint-Germain. So yeah, U.S. has a very strong team. Honestly, they're not going to win the World Cup. They can believe they can win the World Cup. They should believe they can win the World Cup. Realistically, they're not going to win the World Cup, but this is a chance to make a deep run. The signs are there. First game, just one game against a good team, not a great team. So let's see how they do the rest of the group stage. And certainly they're aiming to finish atop the group and put them in a good position for the knockout stage.
How many teams are legitimately just in a completely different class than the U.S.? Is it 10? Is it 15?
No. France, Spain, Brazil, Argentina. You could throw England in there, certainly. Netherlands, Germany, but Germany's down. But Portugal is certainly very high on the list. But yeah, I mean, there's something special about playing at home, and we've seen it in the past. I mean, 2018, Russia made a deep run in the World Cup. It's not a great soccer country. We've seen South Korea when they hosted in 2002 go to the semifinals. So, it's not unprecedented that teams that are kind of like mid-majors, to put it in college basketball terms, make a deep run because they're at home and the energy and the spirit is all there. And certainly the U.S. has that capability right now.
Stephen Goff covers soccer, and the U.S. men's soccer team for Yahoo Sports was in this town for a long period of time as the soccer guy at the Washington Post. So tell me about their Group D. They've obviously, they smothered Paraguay. They've got Australia and Turkey after that. Tell me about those other two opponents that they have. They're favored against Australia, but it seems like they should emerge into the knockout round when we get to the round of 32, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Australia surprised Turkey in their opener. I mean, Turkey, I think, went into the group maybe slight favorites to win the group.
Okay.
But Australia handled it well. Didn't have a lot of possession of the ball, but scored and very organized, very good defensively, took advantage of their opportunities. This isn't their first rodeo either. Australia's been in the World Cup. They gave Argentina a tough match in the past. So this is a difficult game for the U.S. This is not going to be easy. Certainly the level of talent is higher on the U.S. side, but it's a difficult match. And then they'll go into the last one against Turkey, who probably at that point is going to need a result of some sort, a win or at least a tie. The ultimate goal is to win the group, because if you win the group, you go to the round of 32 and you're going to play one of these third place teams that advance because of, tiebreakers and things. That's a huge advantage. Plus you only have to travel up to San Francisco for the next game. So that's the goal. If you settle for second place, it makes it a little more difficult in the knockout stage. The Australia game will tell us a lot.
So let me just make sure I follow that. You've got 12 groups. The 12 winners obviously advance. The second place teams advance. And then, that would give you 24. So 8 of the third place teams advance based on goal differential or record in goal differential, right?
Yeah, I mean, points. If you're a third place team, if you're a third place team with 4 points, you're going through.
Yeah.
But there's going to be teams with like 3 points, and it might come down to their goal differential tiebreakers.
But you'd have to be one of the top. You'd have to be one of the top 8 group winners to face a third place team, because there will only be 8 of them out of the right.
Yeah, exactly. So that the bracket is set up so if U.S. wins Group D, they will play one of the third place survivors.
Yeah, if they're in the top 8, right? So, all right. What's the matchup or matchups are there in this World Cup that the world wants to see or is hoping to see?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if you want to get political, there is a possibility that if the U.S. finished second in the group and Iran finished second in their group, they would meet in the round of 32 in Dallas. In terms of straight up matchups, there's all kinds of different scenarios. Certainly, you're going to see heavyweights face each other down the road. Today is a great one because England has to play Croatia, and Croatia's been to the semifinals the last 2 World Cups. So this is a difficult assignment for England starting off the tournament. Certainly high hopes on England's side. you might see a Brazil-Argentina match at some point down the line, historic rivals. England could end up playing Mexico in Mexico City, I believe, in the round of 16. I think that's a possibility.
Yeah.
And there's Mexico is not a great team, but they're playing at 7,400 feet.
Right.
And in a cauldron of a stadium, Azteca, that gives them an enormous advantage. So Mexico, in spite of their talent level, could make a run in this tournament.
Well, Mexico, I know they played their first game in Mexico City, but are they playing all of their games in Mexico City or not?
No.
Yeah, no.
No, I think, what is it, one in Guadalajara.
Okay.
And then they go back to Mexico City, I think, for the third
so they're staying in their country for all three. Interesting.
Yeah, and if they win their group, they'll be on a pathway where they'd play round of 32 and round of 16 in Mexico as well. There are no games in Mexico or Canada after the round of 16.
Got it. In watching Argentina last night and seeing the Argentinians in Arrowhead Stadium, and there's so much emotion. I was wondering, the most passionate fan bases in the world. Can you rank the top three? Who are the top three? Is Argentina among them?
Man, yes, definitely. I mean, I wasn't there last night, but my experiences, for example, in Qatar 4 years ago, tens of thousands of Argentine fans descended on Doha, and it was just a sea of the sky blue and white jerseys, Messi banners everywhere. The intensity in the stadium at an Argentine match is like no other sporting event I've ever attended in the world. It's pretty extraordinary. Most countries have an intensity. There's different levels of it. There's different tones. I mean, the Dutch is pretty crazy, but it's more fun. And you've probably seen the videos of their the Dutch march, and they've sent over a double-decker bus that's kind of the symbol of the fan base.
Right.
And they just kind of follow the bus around. It's incredible. So Brazil, pretty high. England, just everyone's angry.
Right.
England doesn't win anything, so there's a cynicism and a negativity with England that ultimately they're going to fail. So there's that. But yeah, it's very different. National teams and club. There's always this concern about broad brushing soccer. All fan bases are troublemakers and are hooligans and things. That's more on the club level. You don't see much trouble at World Cups. It's a very different vibe. It's more celebratory, and it's a party like no other in sports or in culture.
Did you make a pick before the Cup? Did you have your World Cup final matchup in winner?
France. I think France is, to me, without question, the best team. They've been to the final the past 2 cycles. So my choice is France. I took England as like a long shot, a dark horse to get to the final. I don't think that'll actually happen, but just to go against the odds, I said England would come out of the other bracket. Unlikely, but why not?
It's 66, right? Was the last time they won it, 1966.
Yeah.
And they've been waiting ever since.
They did it. Yeah.
Was that result the other day, the Spain 0-0 0-0 draw with Cape Verde, one of the biggest stunners that we've seen in recent World Cup history?
Yeah, I think so. 4 years ago, Argentina was the champion, but
Saudi Arabia.
We forget. Yeah, they lost their opener to Saudi Arabia of all teams. So these things happen. I mean, it's a great result for Cape Verde, which has never been in a World Cup, and they're playing Spain, which is probably the second best team in the field. A tremendous effort, tremendous result. It's a draw. That's great. If they had won, it would have been one of the great upsets of all time. But nonetheless, for them, for a small country, given their players' level of talent, that's pretty extraordinary.
All right, last one. I mean, you gave me kind of a France-England final, and England making the final would buck the odds, but they still are one of the top 5 or 6 odds teams. Is there a true, somewhere mid-tier, 10th to 20th kind of team that you consider to be a dangerous team and a dark horse that could make it an unexpected deep run?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly put Norway in that group. Yesterday wasn't the greatest test for them, but
is he the best player right now in the world, Haaland, or not?
I wouldn't say he's the best player, but he's certainly one of the great forces of the game the last few years. He's a giant striker who has a nose for goal, and this is his first World Cup because Norway hasn't been great over the years. There's a lot of talent on that Norway team. They're tested because of their European, qualification and European championships in the past year. So I keep an eye on Norway.
Anybody else?
Man, that's a tough one. Morocco, certainly 4 years ago, getting the semifinal was a big deal. So maybe an eye on them. They won't sneak up on anybody for sure this time. Right. I think
okay.
Hard to say after one game.
Enjoyed it. Last night was really fun to watch. I mean, for just a sports fan more than being a huge soccer fan, but it was really, really compelling to watch Messi in that game. Thanks, Steven, so much.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Hope you're well.
My pleasure. Anytime, guys.
Yep. Stephen Goff, who has covered this sport forever for the Post for many years and now with Yahoo Sports. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
the Boston Celtics select Len Bias of the University of Maryland.
40 years ago tonight, Len Bias was selected. That was David Stern announcing that he was the second pick in the 1986 draft, selected by then defending champion Boston at number 2 overall. Brad Daugherty was picked number 1 in that draft. Len Bias went number 2 in that draft. 2 days later, he was dead of a cocaine overdose. And of course, Len Bias's legend has lived on over all of these 40 years. Incredibly, I think he's one of those examples, and there are a few of them, that the legend actually perhaps doesn't even do his game anyway, his basketball game, the right service. Typically, these are, exaggerated legends that lives in a world of hyperbolic sort of responses. For somebody there that was there and watched every single one of his games live in College Park and every other game on television, I promise you he was the real deal. Amazing, though. 40 years ago tonight, Bias selected number 2 overall by the Celtics. Red Auerbach was super excited. Auerbach, very familiar, obviously, with the D.C. area, and followed Maryland, was very close with Lefty Driesell. Red Auerbach was, and Bias was selected. They flew to Boston for an announcement and a product endorsement signing with Reebok. And then upon returning home on the early morning of June 19th, a cocaine overdose in his dorm room. And it was truly one of the moments that, not just, I'm sure it's much more so for people in this area, but I think for sports fans and college basketball fans, it was one of those, I remember where I was when I heard the news. But that is 2 days from now, 40 years ago. The night he got picked, I remember being so pumped up because the idea of not only him going, now I liked the Lakers. I was a Magic guy much more than I was a Bird guy in the 80s. Magic was my guy when it came to the NBA. I loved Magic Johnson. I loved those Lakers teams. The Bullets were my favorite team, but the Bullets were okay in the early to mid 80s, and they were in the playoffs every year, but they were never a legitimate contender. And I rooted for Magic, and I rooted for those Lakers teams when the playoffs got beyond the round that Washington was in. But the idea of Bias teaming up with Bird and McHale and Parrish and Ainge and Dennis Johnson and company was going to be really fun to watch. I've said this about Bias many times, and I watched some of this on YouTube. They've got a lot of the draft coverage from '86. You can find it, and I just gave you the clip of the commissioner announcing Bias's selection. But in listening to a lot of the conversation about various players, John Thompson was actually part of the broadcast crew that particular night in the draft. And as the Georgetown head coach, he had obviously seen a lot of Len Bias, and he actually said, this is the best athlete in the draft, but he's going to a team where he's not going to get a lot of playing time early on. It's the way Red Auerbach does it. It's the way the Celtics do it. And really, he's not replacing Bird, and they basically play the same position. But he was considered on that night to be the best athlete in the draft. And the thing that a lot of people don't know about Len Bias, he had the Jordan mean streak killer instinct. He had that. And he was different than Jordan, though. I've said this many, many times. He was not Michael Jordan in terms of the kind of player he was. Jordan was a guard. He was a two guard. He was a shooting guard. Len Bias was, a forward, whether you were going to play him at small forward or power forward, more likely small forward. He was a forward. He wasn't going to be asked to handle the ball as much as Jordan did because he wasn't the ball handler Michael Jordan was. It was probably Leonard's biggest weakness as a player. He was not a great and smooth ball handler. What he was an absolute killer inside 15 feet. He would have been a great three-point shooter had the three-point shot been, a prominent part of the game. He had the prettiest jump shot. Unblockable at 6'8" because of his rise and because of where he shot it at the apex of his, arm extension and fingertip extension. And it was absolutely unblockable, and it was gorgeous. He was a great shooter. He was, as an athlete, a guy that finished by dunking on your head, the way Dominique Wilkins did, the way Sean Kemp did. This is the kind of highlight player he would have been. I've always made the comp to Dominique Wilkins. I think that's the player that Len Bias's game most resembled, much more so than Jordan. He had the killer gene that Jordan had, no doubt about it. And Bird recognized it from the beginning. Bird was more excited about the selection of Bias than almost anybody in the organization was. Jan Volk, the general manager at the time, and that particular night or the day after they selected him 40 years ago tonight, said that one of his favorite things about Len Bias was that he played mean. He played angry. He did. Like, he was... If you got him riled up, it was going to be ugly for you on the offensive end, on the defensive end. I recorded something earlier today, actually, with Dave Ungrady. Dave's written a lot about Len Bias, wrote the book on Len Bias, Born Ready, and has actually a series of podcasts out called 40 for 34. It's 40 Len Bias stories about number 34 leading up to the 40th year anniversary of his death on Friday. And, we were talking about some of these games that were memorable. And one of the games that doesn't get a lot of publicity about Len Bias's career at Maryland was a tournament game in the second round in 1985 against David Robinson and Navy. Navy had been upset by LSU, or had upset LSU in the first round, played Maryland in the second round in Dayton, Ohio in the 85 NCAA tournament. Maryland had survived in the first round in overtime over Miami of Ohio, and Ron Harper, who was part of that draft in 86. He went number 8 overall. He had 34 against Maryland in that incredible first round game. Anyway, fast forward to the second round game in Dayton on a Sunday afternoon, and David Robinson had 20 points in the first half, and Navy led Maryland by 5. He was dominating Maryland. And Lefty, and Dave told me this story, Lefty made the switch defensively, putting Bias on Robinson in the second half. Robinson scored an early bucket in the second half to give Navy an 11-point lead in the second half, and then didn't score again. Bias shut him out the rest of the way defensively, and Maryland went on to win that game before losing in the Sweet 16 4 nights later against the eventual national champion, Villanova. Those were the 85 Villanova Wildcats who stunned Georgetown in the NCAA tournament final in Lexington, Kentucky. But amazing how time flies. 40 years ago tonight, Len Bias selected number 2 in the draft by the Boston Celtics. And we all know what unfortunately and tragically happened 2 nights later. But what a player he was in college, and what an NBA player he would have been. Everybody's always projected. I've already told you, I don't think Jordan's the comp. I think Wilkins is the comp. Sean Kemp, is another one of those in terms of the way he dunked. He would have been a player that you'd still be looking back on his highlight career as a dunker. Like Dominique Wilkins, I'm sure for some of you basketball people, he shows up in your social media timeline every once in a while, just the highlight reel. Same thing with Sean Kemp. They were just outrageous dunkers. And I would say and suggest that guys like Neek and Kemp and even Bias, had he played, they would have been great dunkers in today's game. I mean, you can go back and watch the highlights. The head's level with the rim or above the rim when you see Dominique Wilkins and you see Sean Kemp, and Bias is the same thing. I mean, the head is literally level with the rim at 6'8". And he had not only incredible leaping ability, but quick leaping ability. I mean, springy. And then he had the strength to absolutely dunk on your head. I'm looking at the 86 draft. The best player probably out of that draft ended up being either Jeff Hornacek, who went in the second round to Phoenix, or Mark Price, who went late in the first round to Dallas. Price ended up having a really good career in Cleveland as a 4-time All-Star. Mark Price was a phenomenal college basketball player. But that draft had a lot of misses, man, and a lot of misses right at the top of the draft, with Bias obviously at 2, and Chris Washburn, who only played 2 years in the NBA. Major drug issues with Chris Washburn. He and Bias were friendly as competitors. Washburn at NC State, Bias at Maryland. 40 years ago. Crazy to think about Len Bias's pick that night and how it looked like a lifetime of incredible memories for not only him and his family, but for all of those of us that would have followed his career were snuffed out 2 days later. All right, we'll come back. We'll get back into some of the stuff that happened at Minicamp yesterday. I've got a question for all of you. We'll get to that after this. 301-230-0980 if you want to jump on and talk Skins Minicamp. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
there was talk last year, like, could last year be a really good experience for him? Do you see anything, the impact of that at all in him at all this spring?
Yeah, I think it's harder to tell some of those lessons, but for sure, we talked a lot about them and which parts of last year do we want to kick in the ass and get rid of, and which parts do you want to bring those lessons to move forward, not just for 26, but for moving forward. And in practice, you don't get to demonstrate some of that, but for sure, that's a big piece that we've talked, and I'm certain we'll get to express those. Some of it may not be until the game, to really establish that. But he's definitely aware, and I feel that in every way.
Yeah, that was Dan Quinn. You heard the question from John Kine on how last season impacted Jaden Daniels. I think it's, one of those conversations that we've already had and we're going to have between now and opening day in Philadelphia. I mean, we've got basically 3 months between now and the opener. And you heard what he said there. Some of it may not be until the game. In practice, you don't get to demonstrate some of that stuff. But for sure, it's a big piece. And we want him to be able to express that. But some of that won't be able to be realized until you get to the games. Yeah, that you can say that pretty much about everything when it comes to this particular sport. Coaching, players, team chemistry, team productivity. It's so hard to determine anything about this league until they start playing for real. So much more so now than in the past because they don't even hit for much of the off season. And this game comes down to hitting and tackling, things that don't get practiced a lot. But I was thinking about Jaden Daniels and just what last year ended up being for a lot of you, which was, a disappointment at the very least. I personally can't stand the description of regressed major step back season. I just don't get anybody that would feel that way about a guy that literally only played start to finish 4 football games in the 2025 season. Only participated in 7 of the 17 football games. It's impossible to actually evaluate somebody's season on that little of a sample size. Disappointing is one way to describe it. It's disappointing that he got hurt. It's disappointing that he wasn't able to play. It's disappointing that when he did play, the rest of the team wasn't playing in a lot of those situations. The whole year was an absolute cluster, because of the lack of availability of their best players for anywhere approaching the majority of the season. I want you to think about right now, again, we got a long way to go between now and the opener, but there's not going to be a lot that we learn between now and the opener about almost anything, except for the things I always point out. Injuries, real information and real, impact. So knock on wood, he doesn't get injured between now and the opener against Philadelphia. Come up with a description of the type of season he, Jaden Daniels, would need to have for you to feel like he is what you thought he was going to be at the end of the 2024 season. You can come up with any description. It can be team oriented. It could be as simple as, I just want to see him upright for 17 games. It could be statistically what you want to see from him, touchdown passes, yards, rushing yards, completion, whatever it is. Right now, come up with how you think you'll need to feel about the upcoming season for you to believe that he is what you thought he would be at the end of 2024. Now, maybe not all of us felt the same way at the end of 2024. I thought what we had just witnessed was the greatest rookie quarterback season that we had ever seen. That literally a rookie quarterback strapped an entire team, an entire organization to his back and carried the team, the organization, to its first NFC championship game in 33 years. Because all of the examples of rookie quarterbacks who had made championship games previously were really led by their defenses. Washington had a bad defense in 2024. It had a supporting cast offensively that was, not anywhere near elite or anywhere near, really good. This was a quarterback who led the team in every way, shape imaginable to an NFC title game as a rookie player. And so my feeling coming off of 2024, and maybe not all of you agreed, I think many of you will, agreed with this, is that, oh my God, we have an elite level quarterback. It's only 1 year, but that was elite level quarterbacking. By the way, in every possible way, as a pocket passer, as a decision maker, as an extend out of the pocket runner thrower, as a leader, as a clutch time performer, everything you'd look for in elite level quarterbacking, he checked off every single box in 2024. There was, as we got late into the season, we were looking for, well, he hasn't had the opportunity to play big in a big game. He hasn't had the opportunity to play in big games, but then it was easy to check off those boxes. The comeback against Philadelphia late in the season, the comeback against Atlanta to clinch a playoff berth in overtime. And then, of course, the incredible 2 road playoff wins that he led in Tampa and in Detroit against the 1 seed who was heavily favored in their building. And then, quite honestly, he played pretty well against the best defensive team in the NFL, at the end of that year, not only in the game at FedEx, but in the game in Philly, in the Link in the NFC Championship game. He was not the problem in that game. But what do you think you'll need to see from him in the upcoming season that will put us into a spot that we were in this time last year, which is we're talking about, yeah, it's obvious he's the guy. We have the guy. He's one of the best. He's one of the true upper tier elite quarterbacks. He's one of the top 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks in the game. You have to have one of those, and we have one. Given this some thought, and it's in a lot of different, areas that I for me are important. Now, I'll just start off by saying this. I actually don't need to be convinced. I'm a big fan. I don't need to be convinced. I have certainly had conversations with people who, are close to the situation. They're not even a little bit concerned based on last year. They absolutely feel the exact same way about him that they did at the end of 2024. Just in case some of you think, oh, they're really sweating it, they're really concerned. They're not. They absolutely believe that what they saw in 2024 is an elite level quarterback, an elite level work ethic, an elite level maturity. Everything about him speaks to we got it right at number 2 in the 2024 draft. And last year, hopefully, is that aberration year in which our quarterback wasn't healthy. Lamar Jackson's been through it. Patrick Mahomes went through it last year. Obviously, we've seen, Burrow and other elite level quarterbacks deal with seasons in which they weren't available enough to perform. You don't want that to happen because it derails seasons when your best player is a quarterback and he's not playing. But they don't feel like there was a regression. It's laughable to them. It's laughable to me. Even when we get into breaking down the games, and I've heard so many people say, oh, he was terrible against the Giants. He wasn't that good against Chicago. He was the Giant games in opener, he was fine. He was not good, nor was the team against Green Bay. He was excellent against the Chargers. It was reminiscent of 2024, and he was pretty damn good until the rain started to fall, and he had a back-breaking, game-ending turnover against the Bears, but he played well. Those are the 4 games that he played start to finish in. For me, I'm not saying that I am concerned because the data wouldn't suggest that we should be concerned about injury. Okay, so he played 20 games as a rookie, didn't miss a game, played 52 of 54 games in college. Last year, obviously, a major injury-riddled season. I think what adds to those that have concern was this was a concern based on his body type and the way he looked, skinny, thin, looks breakable, you can't make a living with that frame running as much as he does. He's not Cam Newton. That's not the kind of player he's going to be. He's not even Jalen Hurts, who's got a much bigger frame. I am just going to go with the data and say that last year was the aberration. Fingers crossed. But for me, even with that feeling that last year was an aberration, I do think that what's important to me, and I think everything else will follow, is that he just becomes a better decision maker in games with this second year really playing, because he didn't play that much last year again. But to me, once I see that he isn't treating 1st and 10 in a 3-3 game early in the second quarter the same way he should treat 4th and 5 down 7 in the fourth quarter, that's going to be an indication to me that the last part of what I really wanted to see sort of checked off the box, consistent understanding of decision-making importance and picking your spots to lay it all out. I want to see that even in the opener against Philadelphia. I don't need to see a 1st and 10 on a scramble where he's got an opportunity to slide or to get out of bounds and not take a hit, and instead he turns it upfield and takes a big shot. So I want to see that specific area of growth. In terms of the things that some of you felt like he'd do well, was late last year, I chalked that all up to the players he was playing with, the protection. And I think, by the way, this scheme will be good for him. It will be good for him. But I think, honestly, if you get a couple of, rookie, overly, reliant on legs decisions, if you dial those back and you pick your spots on that, I think we're going to see an elite level player. And part of that too blends into, just keeping him healthier. Because this team isn't going to be any good, obviously, if he's not healthy. So for me, I'm looking for your descriptions as much as anything else, because I'm already a believer. I'm already a person that chalks up last year not to regression. I mean, I think it's an absurd notion that he regressed. He didn't play. But it does lead to a couple of areas that I've described that also blend into keeping him upright and healthy. There's no reason for a second and 10 on a play in which you're going to get 4 yards instead of 2 to take the shot for the 2 extra yards in the first quarter. We got to see him pick his spots and be more wise in not only protecting himself, but, making sure that he understands the reason that it makes sense to protect himself in the moment. I would never want him on 4th and 4 down, 27-23 with less than 2 minutes to go, and they're going for it. I would never want anything other than whatever he has to do to move the chains and keep possession of the ball. Those are the moments you can't worry about what the end result is after the play. You're trying to win the game. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Come up with a description of the type of season he needs to have, Jaden Daniels needs to have, for you to feel like the way you felt at the end of 2024, that we have an elite quarterback. Phone lines open. Kevin Sheehan Show, Team 980, theteam980.com. And you can also follow us at Team 980 on X. Today's Waldorf Honda Twitter poll on our Team 980 X account at Team 980. The poll driven by Waldorf Honda. It all starts with a click, waldorfhonda.com. Is the Nats currently hold sole possession of the third wild card spot in the National League. Do they hang on to it over the next 88 games and make the playoffs? Yes or no? I would say no. I think I answered it yes. But I think I would probably say no. But, man, they are having a season that nobody saw coming. Okay, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It's early. We'll have many of Jaden Daniels. We'll have many a Jaden Daniels conversation between now and the opener in week 2 of September against Philadelphia on the road. Remember, back-to-back road games at Philly, at Dallas, 4 o'clock games, 4:25 games to open up the season. But right now, come up with a description of the type of season he would need to have for you to feel that he's exactly what you thought he was at the end of 2024. Max, do you have an answer before we get to the calls?
I mean, much like you, I am a believer in that last year. I chalk a lot of it up to injury and not regression. So I think that with a healthy season and a revamped receiving core and a new offense under David Blau that allows him to kind of be in the play action a little bit more under center, I think it's going to be really good for him. So I just need him to stay upright, stay on the field. That's really all I need from him.
Yeah, my answer is I just don't believe that he is anything other than what we saw at the end of 2024, because there's no evidence that he isn't, because he didn't play enough for you to have any sort of real substance-based information on why things have changed. There are areas of his game, and the one specifically that I've mentioned is just decision-making as a runner in particular. Live to fight another day. 1st and 10 in the first quarter is not the same as 4th and 5 down 4 in the fourth quarter. Understand the difference and proceed accordingly. 301-230-0980. Let's start with Rodney. Rodney, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. I couldn't agree with you more of how you described that. To answer the question, it's health. We need to see him available. That's with any good player. That's with any player in any sport. How soon do we forget that this team went on the road twice in the playoffs? He put the team on his back with a bad roster, a bad defense. In his rookie year, he set all of these records. What else do we need to see as fans to let us know that not only does he have it, he can literally put the team on his back? I chalk it up to some of this fan base having Snyder PTSD, and they panic over. They want to go to the emergency room for a hangnail. I don't need to see anything but availability, and like you said, in game situations, him to get down. And I believe the coaching staff has knocked that in. They're gonna get him out of his own way, and I believe that with a better defense that keeps the ball in his hand, and with play action and running the ball more, he will elevate his game even more because he has it. Everybody just have a little patience. He's our guy.
I'm with you, Rodney. I was thinking about what my answer would be had last season actually been a legitimate regression season. He played all 17 games. The team went 6-11, and he had some really bad games through, instead of what was it in 24, 9 picks, 25 touchdowns, he was more like 16-14 and had some fumbles and misread defense. Then I'd be looking for him to get back to where he was the best player on the field, and we probably have a lot more to pick through. Like, he didn't get through his progressions, or he was late, or he tried to play hero ball, or whatever, it would have been. There's just none of that for me. I listen to national pundits just sort of just write off Washington as, yeah, they regressed and their quarterback was great as a rookie, but he wasn't very good in his second year. I just can't believe responsible people who cover the league would chalk it up to that. They're not paying attention. I get irritated with this because I still think about, the Giant game. He was, he wasn't the best player on the field, but he still was one of the better players on the field, even though it didn't look like his best games of 24. The Charger game did. He was the best player on the field. The Chicago game did until the very end. He was probably the best player on the field. I mean, the Green Bay game was similar to that Philadelphia Thursday night game, the rookie year, the first time they played the Eagles Thursday night, short week off that game against the Steelers, remember? And, and he didn't play well in that game. That was the one game you could really point to and say, wow, Vic Fangio had his number for the first time. How about the second time when he threw for 5 touchdowns? Hollywood in Lexington Park. Hollywood, go ahead.
First of all, Kevin, let me say I agree with you. I am all in on the notion that we have 100% in terms of wanting to see him being more aware of down and distance and situational awareness in the game, that sort of thing. But I think if I had to pick something that I want to see, I'd say in 2024, he started 19 games. I only count 18 because the Carolina game, he only played 1 possession. But in those 18 games, legitimately in 13 or 14 of them, he was legitimately the best player on the field.
Well, he started 20 games that year. They played 20, and he started 20. But you're 20, right. The Carolina game, he was out early after the big hit on that long.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right. It was 20. But at any rate, I think what I'd like to see this year is, of course, he's got to be healthy. I want to see him start 17 games, and I think legitimately in 12 to 14 of them, I want to see him be the best player on the field. That's the kind of ability he has. And that's what I want to see out of him. I want to see him be the best player on the field way more often than not.
Yeah, I like that description, Hollywood. I appreciate that. I think that, for those that may be a little bit squeamish after last year for whatever reason, what you want to see is what you just described, him upright for all 17 regular season games and him being the best player on the field for 2/3 of them. At that position. I think that's a good description. Appreciate it. Let's go to Dave in Massachusetts. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin, this is first time caller. I love your show.
Thanks
for
Dave.
taking my call. I agree with you, man. I agree with a lot of the callers. I just want to see him, make better decisions sometimes and get down when he needs to get down, and to maybe be a little bit quicker on the trigger. I know that we chalk a lot of it up to injuries, and I think that you're right in a lot of it. But I think when I was watching him, I feel like he was like a little bit slow. I don't know if he was scared because his receivers wasn't getting open or whatever, which kind of chalked up to injuries, but really not his. So really, it kind of falls back on Peters for not arming him up right. I mean, we went into the season with Noah Brown as our number 2. And that's what kind of gets me nervous. And if I can't be uncoachable and ask you one more question
sure.
after you answer. I'll listen to your answer and I'll ask you the question and hang up.
What's the question?
Oh, the question is with the Ayuk, with us waiting for Ayuk, it seems like if somebody goes and picks up Diggs and Diggs has a great season next year and Ayuk comes here and flops, what does that say about Adam Peters? And is that a fireable offense if we go into the season?
It's not a fireable offense. It would not be. I'm sure they're contemplating all of their options, but that to me, it's not the easiest of calls right now. First of all, we don't have all the data on the situation with Ayuk. We don't have all the data on how teams currently feel about Stephon Diggs. There are some people that feel Diggs right now is just an excellent possession receiver, but no longer the deep threat. But no, that would not be a fireable offense because It'd be a fireable offense if they gave Brandon Ayuk, if they traded for him and gave him a big guaranteed contract and he flopped. But this is going to be all super low to zero risk going in. If you want to say it's about the opportunity and the lost opportunity with Diggs versus Ayuk, that's just them taking, a gamble that Ayuk's going to be the guy that they think he could be in 23 because he does provide the bigger upside possibility. Thanks for the call, though. Appreciate it, Dave, and appreciate you calling for the first time. Let's go to our guy G from the shop. G, go ahead. Describe Jaden Daniels getting you back to feeling like he is the guy you thought he was at the end of 2024. What does he have to do in this upcoming season?
Sheehan, I'm with you on 2 points, and I only got one concern. The 2 points I'm with you on, I don't need no convincing, just like yourself. My eye test showed me, he's better than Caleb. He's better than Drake May, in my opinion. If Jaden Daniels was with the Patriots, they would have won the Super Bowl. I'm also with you on he needs to know his importance to this team. Definitely got to know the temperature of the game. Can't win a Super Bowl on 1st and 10 in the first quarter. You're right. But my biggest concern is what all the detractors are going to do when he starts 15 in a row. He's an MVP front runner, and we ain't even got to play him against Jacksonville or Dallas at the end of the season because we already got the division and the number 1 seed sold up. We're going to have to do an Amber Alert for Chris Russell and Sabah and them type of detractors, man.
Well, I can tell you on the latter, there is certainly a disappearing act with some of our key people who have been wrong at various times when it's time to come and fess up. No doubt.
Ain't that something? It was funny to hear Drake when Drake May was making that playoff run at MVP season last year. I heard a lady call every day on every channel, on every show. But when Jaden Daniels was doing what he was doing, I was missing her, man.
Yeah. Yeah. How interesting. Thank you, G, as always. Anthony, go ahead.
Real quick before I answer the question, can we eliminate all IU talk until he gets reinstated?
Doubtful.
Once he gets reinstated?
Doubtful. No, because there's going to be a video. There's going to be a report. There's going to be something. No, you can't. Not this time of year. I appreciate you trying to produce the show because honestly, this, I get sick of it too. But when things happen, it's a reaction to, and a projection from.
Okay.
What I can promise you is between now and when whatever happens, I'm not coming in here and just making stuff up out of thin air if something hasn't happened to prompt it. I can promise you that.
I
like today,
that.
no discussion of IU because there was no video yesterday. There was no social media post.
I'm just messing with you, and I think I know the answer to this, but I don't have anything definitive because I've never seen it tried. Do you know if you can defer money in the NFL the same way you can in baseball?
Oh, defer money contractually? You used to be able to do that because you know who was on a deferred contract many years ago? John Riggins. I don't know the answer to that actually off the top of my head. Okay, so get to the Jaden Daniels thing.
The question at hand, I don't have any concerns about Jaden. I'm worried about what's around him, offensively and defensively. If we can get competent play on the defensive side, and on the offensive side, if we can get 24 level or even a dip below that, everything will fall into place. We will be fine. He will learn what he needs to learn when he needs to learn it. That's how that goes. It's just a process. Same growing pains Lamar Jackson went through, he's going to have to go through. So again, if the offense is 24 level or just a step below, and the defense is top 15 or better, we on our way.
Yeah. Thanks, Anthony. Everybody else, sorry, we're out of time. I'm sure we'll be talking about Jaden Daniels in the future. Is Chris back? I think he is, right?
He is. He's staring at me through the window right now.
Chris Russell back in his chair up next.